Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Future Net Zero Insight with me, Kieran Bose. I'm delighted to say that today I'm joined by Lee Hermitage, who's the Marketing Director for Advanced Materials at Honeywell. How are you doing, Lee?
I'm doing very well, thanks, Kieran.
It's good to meet through the screens, as we've become worryingly accustomed to.
Sure.
Last week there was a lot of apprehension in the energy sector around Ofgem's announcement with the price cap. We now know that it will increase to 54%, and that translates to sort of just under a £700 increase in energy bills from April. And obviously that's led to quite a lot of worry and some instability as well that we've already seen in the market. I wanted to ask your point of view in terms of the system we have at the moment. So the gas system we have, it's clearly, not without its problems. How can low carbon heat and specifically heat pumps be the answer to the problems that we find ourselves in at the moment?
I think that the most important thing to remember with heat pumps is they are an incredibly efficient way of generating heat. So if you look at it versus a standard system, it's normally 1 unit of electricity that can produce up to 7 units of heat from a heat pump. So in essence, what you're saying is you're using latent energy from the air or from a water source or from a ground source to generate the majority of your heating requirements. So in essence, up to 85% of a heat pump's energy is renewable. Where it has a major play, I think, in terms of sort of residential, but one of the big areas also that heat pumps are being used in is in district heating. And we're seeing successes in district heating. We saw one in Southwark Council, we've seen another one in Stirling, and many, many more examples, whereby instead of a traditional thinking, which is supplying a fuel source to an individual building, you're looking at generating hot water, which is then passed around a number of buildings from a central system. And that offers a couple of things. Firstly, it offers security of supply, which clearly to most users is absolutely critical. But secondly, it offers a much cheaper source of energy, a more controlled level of costs, which is exactly what the consumers, whether they be residential consumers or whether they be building owners, are looking to achieve. So to answer your question, I think heat pumps provide the perfect scenario to provide more cost stability and security of supply.
A key question that I think a lot of people will ask with heat pumps, I mean, obviously it's still in early stages in terms of installations and infrastructure, but we have seen a push recently, the heat and building strategy from the government as well. If, they tick the box from the point of view of cost and an environmental one, then why is the uptake, still quite slow? And why do you think that people are still quite apprehensive around the technology?
I think first and foremost, for residential heat pumps, that there is always a cost concern. Heat pumps are substantially more expensive than gas boilers. And when you're a consumer, that's the first thing you probably think of.
Sure.
Heat pumps do generate a return on investment. You will get a good payback on it, but it is that overcoming that initial cost, which is the major barrier. And I think governments have to look at that, and governments have to find a way to incentivize or subsidize to offset some of that initial outlay, because I think that's the biggest barrier. I think the other thing which governments have to look at in terms of how these things are costed is there remains a very large cost differential between gas price per kilowatt hour and electricity price per kilowatt hour. And I think the government have to do something to redress that balance as well, so that there is a faster payback, which will then offset that initial capital outlay. So I think in summary, it's really the government need to help people to fund heat pumps in order to make this move forward.
No, definitely. And I think that, with all clean infrastructure and the boost we're seeing, especially alongside heat pumps, electric vehicles is another side that people are, saying will really help kind of clean up what we use and what we produce. So, we've obviously seen that prices are at an all-time high at the moment. And there is a concern around issues such as fuel poverty. And we are talking about here heat pumps, perfect scenario for businesses and more expensive for normal people that want to put them in their own houses. Where do you see the next sort of few years, if you were to think about an estimate of how successful we can make this technology? Businesses obviously come first because they can afford more, but if we can see better subsidies for normal consumers, do you see that this technology can really take off?
I think this technology has to take off. I think if we're looking at decarbonisation strategies, and I think that there is a lot of focus on hydrogen by governments, which I think is for me is an oversimplistic approach. I think they're looking at replacing something that burns with something else that burns. And I think they need to have a broader strategy in terms of looking at alternatives. And as I said earlier, heat pumps is already 85% renewable. And for me, in simple terms, the greenest energy is the energy that you don't use. So if you're preserving 85% of your energy, for me, that's a no-brainer. So I think the government has to shift its focus more firmly onto heat pumps. I think it needs to, as I say, incentivize more from a residential consumer perspective. And I think it has to look at more opportunities for funding district heating schemes, which would enable the adoption of heat pumps to come much more quickly.
Definitely, that's a great point. So I was interested really at Honeywell. Could you explain maybe a bit more about what you guys do and your role in all of this?
Yeah, so we essentially, the division that I work in produces refrigerants, and they are the working gas that are used in heat pumps. And we've spent a lot of money on environmentally friendly refrigerants, which can be used across the board in a number of applications. And in particular, our Solstice refrigerants are now shown to provide additional efficiency improvements in heat pumps versus alternatives. So we are essentially supplying the working gas that goes into those heat pumps, which can then provide additional efficiency improvements over the existing systems.
Perfect. Well, it's been great speaking with you today, Lee, and I hope that for all our sakes, in terms of what we're seeing at the moment, but also the future and our energy consumption, that we really do see an uptake in heat pumps. And thanks for coming onto the platform today and discussing this.
No problem. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thanks, Kieran.